Let's get things started for this evening. Welcome along to this Homerton College subject focus session. My name is Sandy Mill. I am the admissions tutor for the Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences, and I'll be hosting proceedings today, but I'm joined by two people far more important than I am, one of whom is genuinely one of my favourite people in the college, and that's only because I don't know the other one very well yet. I'm joined by my good friend and colleague, Phil Graham. Philip, thank you for coming along and joining us today.
Hello. Hi.
Um,
Each year you have to qualify the increasing levels of sincerity in that announcement.
Yeah, that just sounds like something I do. Phil's our Director of Studies in Architecture and Design. I interview with him in the subject every year. Genuinely one of the most fun interviews I get to do. He's going to be taking you through these two amazing subjects that I've only grown to appreciate more ever since I've gotten to know him. We're also joined by one of our current students on the design tripos, if I've got that right, Manya?
Yeah, hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the very first.
Yeah.
How does that feel, by the way?
It's a quite unique experience to be first person doing a course because we're somewhat like guinea pigs, but it's been quite fun. The course has been good. Yeah.
Brilliant. A couple of things that we're going to run through, a little bit of housekeeping. First up, this session is being recorded. That means that you will be able to watch that afterwards, and the links will be sent around or put up on the Homerton website afterwards. So keep an eye on your emails and on the Homerton website if you do want to rewatch all of the knowledge and wisdom that you're going to be getting over the course of the next hour and a half. In the first few minutes right now, I'm just going to set the scene a little bit with a little bit of information about the admissions process and a little bit about Homerton College. And then we're going to get into an academic session with Phil, talking about these two subjects and how they work and giving you a little bit of an idea as to some of the content. We'll be moving into Q&A for the last half an hour between 7:30 and 8 o'clock today. In terms of questions, please do not use the chat function. I believe it's been disabled. What we'd like you to do is use the Q&A function, please. This means that we don't lose your question. It gets logged in a list. I can easily mark which questions I've answered and which ones I haven't, which, believe you me, makes a heck of a difference in the Q&A section for getting our heads around all the questions that you're going to be sending in. You can also upvote questions that you like, so you don't need to write the same questions several times just to make sure that we've seen it. Only one person needs to get it down, more people that like it that can shoot it to the top of the list and make sure that we see that and answer it. So if you've got any questions, pop them in the Q&A at any point. We may look at them as we go through, but likely we'll just deal with them all at the end in the Q&A section. So don't be worried if it takes us a little bit of time to get there. With that in mind, I have just seen a very quick message come in, and yes, that's absolutely fine. So let's grab this. So hopefully you can see the PowerPoint on the screen. Please, somebody pop it in the Q&A if you can't see it, and they need to do so if you can. But a little bit of quick information about applications and about Homerton College. You know, why consider Cambridge? I mean, it's Cambridge, right? It's one of the best universities in the entire world. I feel like I don't need to say too much more than that in terms of the appeal. Second oldest university in the world that is still open, behind only the dreaded Oxford. But really, it's not just about prestige and the fact that it's old and the fact that it's well known and the fact that it consistently comes, at the top of the UK and world tables. The thing that's really different about Oxford and particularly Cambridge compared to other universities is the environment. You've got the collegiate system, so you're not just a face in the crowd, you're going to be amongst other people studying your subject and many more studying completely different subjects, living, working, and socializing together. That's folks from the UK, every single region, and every corner of the globe as well, coming together as a community to share your thoughts, to share your ideas, to share your experiences in a an environment that is really geared towards learning, where everyone loves geeking out about the things that interest them and want to understand even more about it. Some fantastic pastoral support, which I'll talk about as well as those world-class facilities in terms of the subjects that you want to study. It's blooming Cambridge. What more do I need to say? It's worth noting that the college system is a bit different to other unis. So you have the university, and you have different departments within the university, such as, Phil, is it the Department of Architecture or the Faculty of Architecture? They all call themselves slightly different things.
Department of Architecture.
Department of
I
Architecture.
think. Now you confuse
Yeah.
me already.
Sorry, that's what I do. That decides on the course content, organises your lectures, your seminars, does your examinations as well. They're the ones who decide what marks you get. So all of that stuff which brings together all of the architects or all of the designers from across the university, that's the stuff with faculty. You've got within that faculty as well specialist spaces for drawing, library facilities where everything is related to architecture and design, which is just absolutely fab. Then you've got the colleges, which are your home base. So we're in charge of the admissions side of things. You'll send your application to a college and be interviewed by a college. A lot of academic and pastoral support. You'll have your director of studies, Bill here. If you apply to Homerton, you'll have a tutor as well who is responsible for some of your pastoral well-being. You'll have your accommodation within the college. One of the things with Homerton, we're all on the same site, as opposed to some colleges where there's little satellite sites dotted about the place. But you'll have your accommodation, all sorts of everyday things that you need to live and work. We've got, a coffee shop. We've got the hall for food. You've got your own kitchen spaces for making your own food. You've got laundry, because please wash your clothes at some point. That's something that should happen. All the things you need to live and work and build that community with other people of learners. We're also responsible for the small group teaching, which is special to Oxford and Cambridge, that supervision system. I'm sure you'll hear a little bit about that later on in terms of how that works. But that discussion and dialogue, which really makes the Cambridge experience pretty well unique across universities. Homerton, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Homerton as a college, as the college that I'm associated with, Bill and Manya here are at. Homerton as a college, it's a little bit further out to the edge of the town, but there's got some advantages in that we've got a wonderful large campus. We've got everyone living together. We don't have tourists traipsing through at most hours of the day. And one of the most diverse communities across Cambridge in terms of all backgrounds. It really is it's got some old buildings. Part of it is sort of Victorian in nature, but it's a new college. It's got a very forward-thinking attitude. It's really all about the change that we can create in the world. Programs like Change Makers, all of the ways that we approach our learning, and the impact that we want to make as a community. Different colleges are different. They're like different flavors of Cambridge. You're going to get the same great quality education any way that you go, but each college just feels a little bit different. They can be large, medium, or small, central, or a little further out. They can be old or new, more traditional or more modern, have loads of different facilities. And when you're making a choice, it's just about finding the one that is right for you. The analogy I always use for this is it's like a really good ice cream shop. No matter what flavor you end up getting, it's probably going to be pretty great. You're going to prefer some over others, but the core experience is going to be the same throughout, and it's going to be that really high quality stuff. This is not just because I'm hungry and I want ice cream right now, but there we go. So yeah, Homerton College, we're technically the newest of the college, even though we're a little bit older. 25 acres. We have the highest percentage of ensuite rooms across the entire university. 83% of our student rooms are ensuite. And one of the advantages of being a newer college is that, well, most of them were built with flushing toilets and Wi-Fi in mind, which is definitely an advantage compared to some of the old ones. Some of the cheapest accommodation in Cambridge as well. We do fairly well on that. Bear in mind that when you choose a college, you may end up somewhere completely different. You may end up getting picked out of our pool system. You made an application for another college and you were fab, but they didn't have space for you, and end up with us or with another college. And that is entirely usual. I believe that's also what happened to you, Manu, if I remember correctly, in my role as admissions tutor.
Yeah,
How has it been as a student here and maybe not choosing Homerton, but actually ending up here? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Honestly, I feel like no matter what college you end up in, you do tend to grow to love the experience there. I don't think I'm missing out on anything. I love Homerton and it's been so fun. I've made all my new friends and love the course and everything, so it's worked out.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here as well, to be quite honest. Couple of little things to point out. I'm nearing the end. We can get into the good stuff in just a second. Lots of financial support available across the university and also at Homerton. If you're a UK student and apply for UK student loans, there is a means tested bursary, whichever college you may end up at, of up to £3,500 a year. And that is a grant. You don't have to pay it back. Free money if you meet the financial criteria for it, which can really help. As an undergraduate student back in the day, I qualified for the full amount of it, and it really did make a huge difference to being able to live and work comfortably and being able to not worry too much about the financial side of things. But we've also got travel grants for music. You know, you can learn an instrument and get some money to do that. You can get paid to travel to different places, which I'm sure, as an architecture or design student, I'm sure you can come up with an easy academic excuse to have to go to a certain place to go and see some particular buildings or visit certain museums of design. You could get paid some money to go and do that, have that trip paid off for you. Lots of things to allow you to do internships as well on the holidays. Yeah, you can get some money to allow you to take up an unpaid internship and make sure that you're not losing out financially on that basis. Hardship funds there are available as well. Additional support for young carers, care experienced students. Yeah, no one should feel put off Cambridge if you're a UK student and we're qualified for UK fees. Don't be put off for financial reasons because there is lots of support to cover you there. It's a little bit trickier as an international student with the different tuition fees and the lack of the same access to student loans, but some of these pots of money are still available to you. In terms of the application process, a couple of things to point out very quickly. October the 15th is the deadline for any of our subjects. There is no admissions assessment in architecture or design currently. In terms of a pre-interview one, you'll have a little task that you're given shortly before the interview, typically. But there is no pre-interview assessment, so you don't need to register for anything in advance on that front. One thing that it is worth pointing out, though, is the requirement for a portfolio for both of these subjects, and I'm sure Phil will talk about that in a little bit and how to prepare for that. Apologies if that's not lined up, but I've got a funny feeling that's something that Phil's going to mention. And our interviews take place first couple of weeks of December, so make sure you don't book any holidays during that period. With that in mind, I feel like I have overstayed my welcome, and I think it's time to get into the good stuff tonight. I'm going to pass things over to Phil to take us through the wonderful world of architecture. We'll get us started. Someone's asked how many colleges accept architecture students. I will look that up in the background. I believe it's most of them. I can't think of one that doesn't, but I'm going to double check that information for you.
Or something. There are a couple.
I'll double check it. Yeah, I'll double check it and type an answer in the chat as we go for that one. That'll be my first job. Cool. In which case, I'm going to go camera and microphone off so I don't pull anyone's attention.
Well, you can stay on. A bit of nodding away is helpful to me.
Okay, well, I'll mute at the very least.
I will share my screen. Hopefully you can still see me, as well as the slides I'm going to present. So these are always, because this is a conversation, which if anyone that joins the college doing architecture or design, it will be a 3 or 4 year conversation starting from now. So I always prefer to have interactions, but I guess Zoom doesn't give us all of that, but I think we'll do that through the Q&A once we get to that point. So my name is Philip Graham. I'm Director of Studies for Architecture and Design, but I'm also a researcher and I'm also an architect, which means that I'm constantly bringing in ideas from the world of research, new ideas around policy, but also issues in practice. How do you run a business? How do you work with clients? How do you deliver buildings for real? And it's super difficult and it's super interdisciplinary. And the reason I love this job more than any other that I'm doing is that I get the chance to have those conversations with new people like Manya. So I'm going to show you a little bit about why I get excited about this stuff. Manya's going to jump in whenever she feels like it, and because we're a part of that conversation. And let me just see if this will let me move forward. There we go. So I'm going to go through 8 little sections. First of all, why to study architecture and design, and that's to do with Cambridge. And then, and by the way, for the person that asked, or was it Sandy that asked, architecture is in the Department of Architecture, but it's the Faculty of Architecture and Art History, for anyone that's fact-checking me here. So yeah, studying architecture at Cambridge, studying design at Cambridge, and so Manya will speak particularly about that one. I'll just show, I put together a bit of a diagram of the 2 different courses so you can see what's different, and the intention for those. I want to tell you quite a lot, and one of the reasons these slides took a little while this afternoon is because we've done so much stuff in the last couple of years. I wanted to show an update of what we do here at Homerton. I want to tell you a bit about what architecture is because sorry, I'm just waiting for somebody to stop banging down some stairs upstairs. One of the problems for people applying to architecture is that you haven't done architecture at school. You've done science, and so you might do a science degree. You've done history, so you might do a history degree. You haven't done architecture as an A-level subject. And so I'd like to tell you a bit about what that actually is. And then something about the process of applying to Homerton, the entry requirements, and then a bit of a subject taster, which is describing what we try and teach in the department, which varies all the time. So, and the illustrations that's on the right-hand side is by one of our students, a model in her second year. So why study architecture first? And I'm not going to do death by PowerPoint. There's a few points I want to make to start with before the pictures start. But there's many schools of architecture in the country. And what we do at Cambridge is try and combine a lot of theory with practice. So you understand practice from practicing architects. You're not being taught by people who have not understood the world of practice. And so that combination of theory and practice means you understand what we do and why we do it. And that's the crucial thing. It's a small course, and we are aiming for 90 people per year, but it feels small because it gets broken down into design studios. We have a very strong social agenda. My PhD happened to have been with the head of department, Flora Samuel, whose entire focus is on social value mapping, social purpose in architecture. And so all those goals, not just from her, but from across the department, is to do with why we do what we do. There's a strong studio culture, so we have a big studio space. It means that you can be in there learning from other parts of the year, other year groups. We have a very good digital manufacture facility in the Dyson building next door, which is all part of the same department facility, so we can make cool stuff and start to iterate, which is not just making a model to show your idea at the end, but it's actually using the model making to develop that thinking. And it's that process I want to kind of emphasize through this conversation. And as I said, you have access to researchers, practitioners, and other years in student years. And the last thing to say is ArcSoc, the Cambridge Architectural Society, has social events, life drawing, and other fun things over the year. So there's a good culture which you start to pick up on. And here's the department or the studio. So talking about architecture first, I asked some of our students to throw me some images of their greatest hits. And I put them in little groups of the same student. And this was a project from, and I don't have my notes now because they're hidden by this slide view, but I can remember it. This was a second year project, and it was looking at a therapeutic environment, building up. How would a building have a conversation with nature? How could it be a place of calming and recovery? And so she studied a series of models and some, I thought, pretty beautiful sections. This was final part of the second year, so lots of learning up to this point. So don't be put off by the level of drawing here. Something I like about this is the storytelling aspect, because you can see all sorts of stuff happening. We're bringing life into buildings, and I'll talk a bit about that afterwards. And here's one of her renderings. Same project, but you started to get that richness of life into it. This is a different student, but this is showing her final project in first year. Wrong, Michaelmas term, so it would have been the first term in first year. This was a study of an existing building. This was her second year project, which was then, it was to do with a flooding, I think it was a bird watching, ecology watching facility on the coast. And you can sort of see, I think, her drawing ability and her design ability progressing through this and starting to study on the right-hand side. Oh, last night I put the laser pointer on. Give the laser pointer. There we are.
Can I ask you, Phil, what's the difference between sort of just drawing ability and this architectural ability that you're talking about, that we can see progressing for those who might not be in the know?
Yeah. Good question. So it really helps to be a reasonable drawer, but you don't need to be a master drawer. You need to be able to communicate through drawing. And I really, if you're doubting your drawing ability, just draw, and you'll discover that it's something you were coached out of when you were little, and you can do it. And I often
It's also less about, sorry, I said it's less about making like perfect visual drawings and more about conveying the message of the drawing. So they don't have to be beautiful in their sense. They can just show the message the drawing is trying to let the user know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In fact, this one has quite a lot of collage in there. So using different techniques to pull other people's drawings into yours, because you're, as Manya said, exactly right, trying to convey a story through it. It could be cartoons, as I'll show you coming up. But you can do it. I often say to people, we have this horrible expression, arty-farty, which is used from early age and in the UK to sort of diminish drawing ability. And you never hear sciencey wincy or musicy woozicky, but you hear arty-farty. And so we have to get back into the understanding that this is a serious way of communicating. It's a language, and we should be comfortable expressing ourselves with it. So going forward, this was a school project, and she really got into the details of how it worked. I don't think she'd mind me showing this conversation that we had, because she just suddenly found out, oh, I've not made the crucial decisions here. And we had this great meeting when this was in the final project, when having had so much success, she just couldn't make these decisions. And so we had a session of just, okay, what are the reasons for choosing things? And we were just scribbling. We had an hour of scribbling just to try and get through those. Where is this building? Give me a reason for this building to be where it is. And then she carried on with what she was doing and went from panic stations to getting a first. And this was her final project. And the reason I showed that kind of moment is that everyone, including me, has a rubbish moment in their process. And it doesn't mean you're a bad designer. It's just you can't make a decision, and it's all about decision making. And this is why the director of studies role is a sort of mentor. Maybe Manya will disagree, but a sort of mentor that helps us to make decisions, understand why we're doing what we're doing, and steer things around to the right point. And this was her final section. So studying design, I think you can talk to all of these slides, Manya, but I can start with this create, critique, analyze, explain mantra, which Manya just told me before we started that she's told every week, I think, in your course.
Just it's the first slide of like every lecture. It's just there at the start. Yeah.
Oh, I wonder if we've lost Phil. He seems to have frozen, which is unusual.
Yeah.
So while we try and get him back.
Oh yeah.
Why is that? Oh,
yeah.
in which case we're all good. I was going to ask, why is that the sort of mantra for design? What does that tell us about design and how it's taught at Cambridge, really?
Sorry, I cut out there. Are you?
No. Oh,
everyone back?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Fantastic. I have no idea. It could be your end. It could be my end. The question I asked was what does, this is the mantra that is at the start of every single lecture, Manya. Yeah, how does that link in with the course and how it's taught? What is that really saying about design at Cambridge?
Well, it sort of goes through the entire process of design. So it's like you try to create something which is based on some sort of problem you're given, but then you can't just like address the problem immediately to like understand all the factors that affect your design or just understand where your idea is actually coming from. And then to be able to do that in a more technical sense, which is sort of where it divides from architecture, because this is more about understanding the engineering or like the science maybe behind certain design decisions. So it's about analyzing those things, like testing them. So because we do a lot of maths, we can like use things like visual or like CAD softwares and stuff with vectors or other like scientific measures to actually like test some of these things that we're making, like the angles. We had like a physicsy sort of module at the start where we looked at the forces and structures behind the building. That's shared with architecture, so that's sort of where the analyzing bit comes in, and then explaining is just everything, the whole process of our portfolios, which is like the way we like sketch, present, discuss our ideas with people. So I feel like the mantra just sort of runs through the process of design, sort of like encompassing everything the course kind of has.
And the final question for me is that just a linear process or is that a cycle?
That's actually quite interesting. I guess it could be a cycle. To be fair, it doesn't really happen one by one. There could be several of these tiny cycles within one project, like, and then there will be like a big one that's overarching. So you could create, critique, analyze, explain multiple times during the project, and then one like overall one. Did I? Yeah.
I can go through some of your slides, your
Yeah.
drawings, Anya, if you want, just to say why you did these.
Yeah. So these are some of my messy initial bits. So this is more about surveying and research. So the one on the left you can see with all the door measurements is just sort of we had the task of actually drawing out these doors to scale, which were we could pick any random doors anywhere. So we went to pick this door, and to be able to draw it, we had to understand how we can actually process this sort of information because they had a lot of where you can see the flowers and the old-fashioned like coils and curls and details. So it's about understanding and breaking down what we actually saw on the door and then beginning to take measurements and then understanding what sort of parts there are. You can see like the hinge and things. And then with further with the parts, when we were researching what sort of um like the theme to focus on, we looked at watchmaking and then to be able to understand how you can actually design something for watches. We need to first break down and zoom into what watches actually have. So then I looked into all of the parts of this watch and yeah, and the watchmaking process. And there's a bit of a sketch, well, a couple of sketches on how watchmaking can actually relate to the research I've done. It's it kind of like shows how design is like inspired through research. Um, well, that is the final door you can see on the left there. So the first slide sort of shows how I surveyed and measured the door, and this is the final drawings of the door. It's like a orthographic drawings on an axonometric. And then the thing on the right is, and it's about storytelling once again. It's about showing the journey for your design. So my design is like an apple processing station, or was at the time. So before I started designing anything, any buildings or any structures, I had to actually look at the processing of apples, like zoomed in just that. So I just made this axle, so showing how apples like first collected and then sorted and then like made into cider or whatever. So it was helpful to actually start designing my building. Yeah. Oh, you're on mute. Phil, you're on mute.
There we
Yeah.
are. Sorry about that. I was saying on this drawing, this goes to Manya's point about a drawing is just a way of communicating. So whilst this is a beautiful drawing, it's also really it's a diagram in a way, and it could have been done with collage or Photoshop with different pictures.
Yeah. This is a more sketchy side of the process of designing that Apple processing station. So this is like zooming into the site and the journey to the site. I looked at first of all, obviously like a map of everything that's around it, but then also a way of displaying how I actually processed what was around me. So obviously that's through sketches and drawings, and then using color to show different things like movement, and then hairy drawings, which is just like scribbling everything you see around you as like a quick way of noting your surroundings. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is about communication. Yeah.
Hairy drawings like that.
Yeah. But these are the collages. Well, that is a collage I've made, and it's sort of showing the process initially, but with more details. And now this sort of kind of brings in my idea into a more visual format, so you can see that I in like visualize like connections of different things, a timber sort of structure. It starts to explore things like materiality and I don't know, textures into it, and also like the way people are interacting with it. It like immediately when you look at this drawing, you don't have to struggle to sort of understand it. You can just kind of grasp my initial concept. That's kind of what it's there for. And that's like an axle again of one specific room.
Right.
Yeah.
I like that axle. It reminds me of the Sir John Soane's museum desk that we saw last week.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Display on light. That's models and more collages. Just different ways of communicating similar ideas. So rather than just focusing on drawings, can be through digital models, through physical modeling, through making collages and layering different images on top of each other. Yeah.
Manya, was this kind of straw structure, was that a structural experiment or a spatial?
At the top left. There's a precedent study. It's sort of an interesting way that they can like try to improve greenery or like farming in an urban area, just sort of what my apple orchard processing system was sort of inspired by. So we like built models of those kind of studies in groups so we could understand like the way they've been structured or any motivations behind designing them. So we did that. It was cut with like tubes of paper, long.
Yeah, it's a good
Yeah.
model. So quite a lot of what Manya's course has been this year overlaps with the architecture course. So design and architecture sort of start off pretty closely together, less the maths really, and they start to pull away later on. And I'll show that in a diagram coming up. In fact, here it is, well timed. So this is the structure. If I can take over from you, Manya, here, then this is the structure of the architecture course. It's in 3 parts, undergraduates in 3 parts. All this is on the website, so I don't need to go into it in too much detail, but the main thrust is that you've got the design studio, which is just over half of the time and credit, and then the lectures and supervisions, which follow pretty much the same pattern, but start leaning more to, always have professional skills, but start leaning more towards the dissertation and technical elements as you go through, always with that piece of history and theory. And the dissertation is a really interesting chance to get deep into an idea or a topic area. So I'm supervising 3 of those this year. So that's the architecture course. And then the design course, you can see quite similar in the first year. History and theory becomes of design in first year rather than just in general. And you've got the maths and programming, but otherwise it's the same course. But then as you go on, there's other things like more of a technical emphasis. You can see Design Studio has this geotechnical water and timber, and then concrete, steel, sustainable materials. And there's an element of land surveying, which I'd forgotten about until I was checking back in on it. But all these things are coming up. So we're only at this, almost at the end of this first year point. Anything to say about that, Mania?
I mean, I wasn't quite aware of how year 2 and year 3 and year 4 would actually play out. So this is quite interesting because at the start we had like initial information, but not the stuff about the geotechnical design project. From the start, well, yeah, we do share most of our lectures with the architects, and the history and theory of design, while it looks as though it's replacing the history and theory of architecture, it's not quite like as big of a module. It's like cut down in half, and maths and programming is a much bigger module for us. So we have an end of year exam on that, and our lectures are also shorter for history and theory. We only have like an hour a week. So I guess that's the biggest difference from the architecture course then. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. But again, all that is on the website.
Yeah.
So at Homerton, I'm trying to, I sort of thought through all the different advantages we have at Homerton. We have a bigger undergraduate cohort than elsewhere. I don't have the exact numbers, but there's some colleges similar size, many smaller. So we have 12 undergraduates in total across design and architecture, which is quite a nice number. We're sort of nudging up each year. We meet annually. The start of the Director of Studies meetings are twice per term, towards the start and towards the end. Alongside, I should reinforce what Sandy said before, that there's the college tutor, which is more of the pastoral welfare check-ins. Then on top of those 6 meetings that we have, so for example, Manya and I will meet start and end of each term, there's also chances just to check in on things. And that relates to that example I gave you before of the student that just needed to think through about decision making. So that's what I enjoy, and hopefully the students enjoy, is having that opportunity. I try to get 2 or 3 guest speakers or workshops in each year, and I'll show a few of those just now. We do 1 or 2, I call them architectural safaris, which is when we go on a usually surprisingly long walk. Past 2 years have been in London, and I'll show you some images of that, but London and then Cambridge. We try and have special meals together. There's formal meals, of course, but we try and have subject meals. And those are often a great chance to entertain our other supervisors, but also some guests, and have a conversation with people from outside the college. And then I try, because I'm in practice, I try to introduce our students to some of the leaders in practice who I have got to know along the way. So, for example, last week I was able to introduce a student to Peter Clegg, who's could be useful for her dissertation project, and he runs Field and Clegg Bradley. So little things like that help to make this a big conversation. So at Homerton, what I'm trying to do to start with, I think, is trying to get beyond the baggage that you bring to college. So that by baggage, I mean personal perceptions of the world and what you think architecture is, and often quite a narrow perception of things because you've tended to have experienced your home, your school, and then briefly university. And so I bring in people like this guest from the other day to have conversations about what the world of work is, even beyond architectural practice. So we had quite a long conversation with Zora over before, after, and during dinner. And I try and get it into your understanding of the social purpose of architecture, because I think we tend to see grand designs and funky buildings, but we don't understand what they're trying to do. And I'm quite conscious that in my own role in practice, I carry a line of other architects that have employed each other. So here's my former boss, Ted Cullinan, who was employed by Dennis Lasden, who was employed by Bertold Lubetkin. And these are very well-known British architects that have kind of passed down a bit of a story about what architecture is supposed to do. So I feel my baggage is to be duty bound to teach you some of this stuff and show you it, and I learn it for myself for the first time as well. So last year we came to my office in London by the canal, and we learned about passive cooling and low energy buildings using a low energy retrofit, so using an existing building. And then we did some big distances looking at some pioneering architecture in London from 1938 until 1986 or so, was that period. So it's the Barbican, Finsbury Health Centre. This is the gang here, as well as not you, Manya, because you came this year.
Yeah.
We went to the theatre because I wanted the students to understand how architecture, how buildings change, have a different life over different political periods. And this play, I don't know if it's still running, but it was really an excellent chance to see that story being told based in the Park Hill housing scheme in Sheffield. We also went to see some just around the corner actually from Homerton. It was amazing. Minimal housing for formerly homeless people, and this was a sort of stepping stone home delivered by a local charity on church-owned land. And we learned from the investor, in fact, or the sort of financial manager of the whole project, how to do minimal housing, and that was pretty amazing, because I've noticed that some of these students, Rushi was referencing some of the dimensions the other day, so some of this stuff sticks, and it's stuff you wouldn't normally get to see. 2 weeks ago, or was it last week, we went to London to look first of all at Sir John Soane's Museum via a few other stops, and this was us sketching beforehand. We went round the IBM building, which has just been refurbished, designed actually by one of the people I showed in that slide before, Dennis Lasden. And so this has been refurbished. So we learned about how to reuse as much as you can in the building. And this is the steel work, the concrete, reinforced concrete from when the building was first built. So how do you save on carbon, save on energy by reusing stuff and making it look great at the same time? And then that afternoon, you can notice people are now lying down on the ground because they're so exhausted. But it was a great outing, which we finished in Cambridge, looking at the Accordia housing scheme, which won the Stirling Prize exactly 10 years ago, and it was guided by the architects. So understanding what makes great housing, what makes great buildings, which things you might not see unless someone was showing it to you. And we try and show you this stuff. We had a workshop. That was fun, wasn't it, Manya? The Sketchplanations workshop.
Yeah.
Any takeaways from that?
Well, it kind of showed us how we can break down bigger concepts into smaller, like 30-second sketches, and like it helps jot down different ideas that we had. It was like an interactive sort of session, kind of pulls you closer into the course, like a different point of view of the way you design things. It's quite informative.
So these are things we don't have to do in college, but we try to do because they're fun. But this
Yeah.
John O'Hay here has made a career from doing Sketchplanations, and you can follow his blog, but he showed us how you can get an idea across quickly and have some fun. This was fun, wasn't it, Mandy? This was
Oh yeah, the
um,
escape room.
fun.
Yeah, it's sort of a thing after our subject dinner. We ended up going in there and yeah, it was like this escape room and they broke us down into groups to do these specific tasks inside this big maze thing. Had a bit of a horror vibe to it. It was quite fun. Um yeah, we didn't escape though. It was quite fun.
So a little bit about what architecture actually is. And the reason I show all this teamwork, including the escape room and collaboration, communication. Here's my office and a whole working team on a project trying to make decisions. And it's not easy. And it involves storytelling and collaboration, listening, carefully listening, diplomacy. All these things are, I don't know, are they things we teach properly? I think you can't really without knowing it firsthand and without trying a whole series of different ways of doing things. So this is what I try and get across. So decision making is not easy. So we try and do it in my office by giving simple messages to get people's attention, which resonate with what the current interests are in politics and building. So I'm not going to talk about these projects particularly, but this is the sort of reservoir of projects I try and draw from my office and from my own personal experience. So this is all to do with route finding and view making in Bristol, a project that's housing led, but place led really in terms of the way you experience it. This was thinking about Sketchmanations again, this was a cartoon series I did to win a project for Alderhay Children's Hospital, all about how children interact in the hospital environment. And you can see this is pretty simple drawing, but it's just getting an idea across. And that became an idea for a children's led hospital, which was all about play and outdoor space. And here it is being built on the left. It's now finished and has won some prizes. And in fact, was the subject for one of our students' dissertations this year. And she interviewed some of the leaders of this building in terms of the design side, but also the user groups. So that's an advantage of this kind of practice and college relationship I try to set up, that I can invite people into my office world and do some learning, which is of mutual benefit to us as a practice. Here's some more storytelling. You can immediately tell from this drawing that this is a Maggie Centre in Newcastle, that it's all about the sun and how the sun hits the people and the gardens and the solar panels on the roof. And here it is in real life, and trying to make a sociable building which is also a natural, a garden building. And then looking back in time at ways that people have told stories, I try and use references of old drawings. So I like the fact that this diagram was explained, the school was just explained using leaves and sticks. This is Morales, I'll flip forward and backwards, the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh. Again, you explain using leaves and sticks. And I try and remind our group of students that they don't need to be amazing drawers. You can make quick decisions using things you found. And as long as you can tell a story about it, you can convince people that that's the way to go on their project. And here is Cambridge Faculty of Maths, which my office designed about 10 years, a bit more than that, 15 years ago, and included a series of pavilions with a garden in the middle. And it was all based around fractals. So we had this story about how each part was a diminishing part of the same repeating whole. So I'm only showing those as a sort of sense that there's a practice behind the conversations that we have, and storytelling is fundamental to it. So we have, what, 10 or 15 minutes. Let's talk about applying to the course. This is what Sandy and I get involved with every December. We ask for a minimum A star AA for architecture. But typically it's A star, or 2 A stars and an A, and there's equivalents on the IB score there.
Sorry, just for clarity there. So yeah, the offers that we make are typically A star, AA, as Phil has just said. It's just interesting to know that most people, if you're worried about that being quite a high offer, it's got an A star in there. Most people who actually are successful in getting onto the course actually exceed their offer. So most people who are starting actually typically end up with 2 A stars and an A. It's because we are really good at picking academically strong candidates, and also because if you've been given an offer of A star AA, you've got a lot of incentive. You want to make sure you hit that offer, and often people, really do push to make that happen, and that often ends up in a second day start. So don't be worried or put off by that in any way. And apologies, Phil, I just wanted to just be very clear.
Yeah,
so our
please.
offer is A-star AA, typically in architecture, although all offers are personalized based on the individual. But
yeah. Thanks, Andy. In architecture, often I think the stat was 90% of students on the architecture course have at least one of maths, art, or physics. I would really emphasize that these are not essential. I think I have a lot of interest in students that come with range into the course. And by range, I mean, they might not have done art as an assessed subject. They might do that on the side and be very good at explaining ideas in art. We have a student whose artwork is all to do with explaining his biology work, his history work, but was not an assessed subject. And I'm also very interested in students that might come with things like economics or politics or history, geography. These are all super relevant to what we do in architecture. I would say in a way more so even than physics and art. So don't think, oh, I haven't got the right subjects at all. Come and have a go, because we want to have that conversation. And the architects of tomorrow or even today really have to be so much more diverse and, I suppose, literate in the history and theory side of things than maths, art, and physics will allow. So anything to say on that, Sandy?
Yeah, just very briefly, someone's asked whether arts and humanities subjects, essay-based subjects like philosophy, are relevant to the architecture course. Absolutely, that's the sort of thing we're talking about when we're talking about range, things like economics, etc. Some colleges do require A-level art, but we don't. So have a look carefully at the colleges that you're applying to, but we have no compulsory subjects. Some other colleges may require A-level maths or physics for architecture. Again, just check the details on individual colleges, whether they have any required subjects. But for Homerton College, we have no required subjects. We love to see a little bit of that range as well as part of that. I think that's all I've got to say there.
Okay. Yeah, just to emphasize on the design side, we got any Wi-Fi issues? Hear me okay there? So it jumped for a second.
Still fine for me. I should say all of that is for architecture,
Yeah.
just for clarity as well. Design is very slightly different, which we'll go into right now. I think you're all good, Phil.
Yeah. Yeah, so design, we require further maths at A-star.
Sorry, no, mathematics at A-star for design.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
You don't require further maths. Sorry, no accidental panicking for people there.
People often, I started writing for actually correct that. Yes, people often have further maths, but maths at A-star is the requirement.
Yeah, and that is across the board, across the whole university. Mathematics is a requirement for design, and in fact, your offer will include an A-star in mathematics across the board for any college that you apply to in design. Oddly, it's the only subject that has a specific subject that's required and officially a specific grade tied to it, which is an admissions oddity. But if you're applying to design, you do not need further maths, but many people do have it. You do need mathematics, and you're going to be asked to get an A-star in it if you get the offer.
Okay, thanks for the clarification there. So in applying, you would send us a portfolio, and that would just be about 6 pages on A4. It's all described in the application pages, but it's your most interesting drawing. So we're not looking for the most polished ones necessarily. We might be interested in seeing how you got there. So showing us the journey, a messy sketch which came to then a finished drawing is very useful to us. A sketchbook. Sorry, before I go into the sketchbook, in that process and portfolio work, trying to show a range of media is very useful. So sketching, modeling, might be something digital, might be painting, just to get those things in there. Sketchbook, and we want to see a habit of drawing. So not just a few drawings that you did specifically for this application, but something that you might keep in your back pocket a lot of the time, or your bag. We want to know through the interview how you're able to engage with an idea. So we need you you've probably got quite comfortable in having conversations around dining tables or with friends, with your guardians or other people that you know in school. just that ability to take an idea, run with it, develop it, maybe change your ideas as you're going along. And we can sort of see that in the conversation. So it should feel fun. That was one of the things when we met the offer holders this year. Everybody was saying, "Oh, my interview was so much fun," and that's the whole point. If you're enjoying it, you're enjoying the conversation. And that's why we're all doing it. So here's a sketchbook to remind us to sketch. This was one of our students. In the applicants, we're looking for, and this is a sort of blanket thing really, but we're looking for your potential. It's not just your ability, it's your potential. So sometimes people think, oh, I'm not the smartest, I'm a bit worried about being the most articulate, I'm not the best drawer. If we can see that you could be that thing, then you've got a good chance. And we've got a habit of finding it through these interviews. And Sandy and I interview together. We so far been doing 45-minute interviews, and you can just tell when someone's enjoying themselves and that they just stop. You can see they've given up thinking it's an interview. They're just like we're going for a run together, and it's really fun. It's fun for us as well. So make sure you satisfy the subject requirements. We want to see that you're genuinely interested in this subject. So we will have a conversation about buildings that you like or dislike, and we might disagree. Quite often we do. And we would discuss why we disagree about that. But you would have to have had some prior thinking about that thing.
And it's okay to disagree, by the way. We're not looking for you to match our answers. We want to know what you think, why you're thinking those things, getting you to communicate that. You don't get marks for having the same taste as us.
Yeah.
Actually, it's about how you talk about the things that you are interested in.
Mm. And why. We, at least certainly at Homerton, we're very interested in how interdisciplinary you are. So you should be wondering not just, oh, that's a nice building, isn't it pretty? But oh, how did that building get there? What damage did it cause to get there? Could it have been done in a less damaging way? Do we even need it? How is it being used? Who built it? Was it, who made the decisions? Was it an equitable decision-making process, a safe construction? And all those kind of supply chain and materials and political thoughts which come with this production of the built environment. And that's why I was saying having a knowledge of economics or history and geography is really, really not a bad thing, even if it's not listed there. In fact, it's a very good thing. Yeah, so comfortable with new ideas. And often in interview, we want to see people who won't just change their mind because they think it would be pleasing to us, but we might all come around to a different position. We want to see that conversation developing, not a sort of dogmatic, fact-based thing. So I'm conscious of time. I'm going to keep moving quite quickly. I think I've said most of these things. Comfortable with new ideas, be able to draw. So we might ask people to give us a sketch of something. Can you think how to draw something? And that's not a test of your drawing ability. It's your ability to kind of communicate in means other than words, sometimes by a diagram. So I think you get the impression from this conversation of what we're looking for. I'm going to show a couple of slides that we've shown in interviews. We obviously ask questions that don't have slides, but we have sometimes some images that we ask you about. Unfortunately, this is one, short of time, and two, not interactive. So I'll just kind of preview this, but we would have conversations about, can you spot any similar approaches in some of these images? What problem are they trying to solve? Often it's to do with minimizing material use, managing solar gain, dealing with rainwater. How do you use cheap materials in a way that doesn't stain? How do you use natural materials? How do you avoid using paint and coatings? And we have these conversations about why things are so. So these are just often prompts for a question we might ask you. And this is a way we use of testing whether you can critically look at a building or look at a problem. And this was another one we used, which was asking, what would you think these people, these sort of building makers of the 21st century, what sort of jobs might they do? And this fed into a conversation we'd had in the run-up, but we were asking, okay, for example, what would a material nurse be all about? And we're looking for people that might think, okay, it's kind of a funny name for somebody who might take old materials and refinish them so that they can be used again. We'd have a conversation on the back of that about what applications that might have and how it might be relevant to the images on the side, which are using found materials, for example. So yeah, this is standard college stuff, but what else are we looking to assess your applicants? Your personal statement up to a point. It's always relevant, but the interview is more important, I would say. There's sometimes some prior assessments, and obviously your school record and things that your teachers might say, or your that you've written yourself. Anything to add, Sandy, there?
Nope, I think we're all there.
So I promised to give a little subject taster session. So I thought I'll do one about the master plan that we did this year. And Manya, you got wind of this a bit from some of the things that we were doing, but this was for the third year. So we realized in the college that we have been making building decisions which didn't have a master plan, a strategy, or not a complete strategy to inform the next phase of our decision making. And in a conversation with our principal, Simon Woolley, I said, well, why don't we ask some students to have a go at it? And he thought this was a good idea because we're that sort of college. And so we involve Studio One in the third year in making their whole year project. This is their final year project, all about Homerton College and the future master plan and building decisions. And what was amazing is that we started by doing this consultation process. And that involved designing a process, understanding how the college works, and then going back to interview people with drawings. And here are some of the interview processes. Top left is interviewing or speaking to the gardeners. Bottom left is hanging out with Simon in his office. Here we are meeting the kitchen staff, understanding how a kitchen works, where deliveries come in, all these things which drive the way a college works. This was meeting the cleaners and housekeeping. And this was students with a kind of consultation board in the buttery. Here was our meeting with Simon, where he was being interviewed by the students about what it means to be in a college and what we're trying to emphasize. And his whole message of do what you like. You've got a blank sheet. He was showing a blank sheet here, but we want a college where we emphasize belonging. Everyone should belong here, whatever their financial or cultural or heritage or religious background. Educational and so on. And so here's this group of students with Simon at the end of the first visiting day. And then with a debrief with their studio teachers, they're called design fellows here. So this is Richard and Sarah in the grounds of Homerton. And then everyone came back, and there was this amazing session in January, end of January, when the same students presented their master plan ideas to the whole college. And it's pretty daunting to be a third year sitting doing that. But it was such a professional job. I couldn't believe it. And we had guest reviewers, somebody from my practice. Flora Samuel came. We had some people from the Cambridge Urban Rooms project, plus Simon and of course the college. And what's been great is actually some of my students who are in this group have said, yeah, we're in third year now. How should we go about getting a job in practice? And I said, you go to any practice you like and say, I can design and deliver a consultation process and manage the data, and they will bite your arm off, because this is something which practices are just learning how to do, and these are students which are going to walk into practice able to do it. So it's that sort of extra ability that we try and feed into our students, which should pay off over their life in practice, or wherever they choose to go, which might not be practice. And very quickly to finish, I thought we'd do something a bit more technical. So what would we talk about if we were looking at timber construction? This is looking more at you, Manya, for the design course. So my office is very interested in wide span timber structures. Here's a steel version of a wide span structure for a Zeppelin. And we've done projects using green oak in thin sections, which produced this drooping frame, which became this Wheeland and Downland grid shell project, which is a kind of a field center of sorts for making. Now, all this was possible because the green oak was very flexible, and part of the design course that Manya is doing is not just the architecture, but how do materials allow you to do things you might not otherwise have done with less energy use, less travel distance. And so this would be the sort of project we present when we're talking about our work in the department. And that whole project comes down to one detail. And I'm sure someone like Manu could calculate the structural abilities of this detail, or the bending strength, or the degree of rotation on each of these connections. But each of these connections that you might see here are what makes this whole grid work and droop in two directions. And here's the space on the inside. And we've since gone on to do timber. I don't have enough time to talk about this in much detail, but wide span timber structure in lots of different ways in order to create wide open, usually museum or research center spaces. And you can see things like this bowstring roof gives you a sense that the architecture and the materials and the structure are all part of one conversation, which is the whole point of the design course. It's about the production of buildings, not just spaces. And it all is all relevant, reminded daily about timber construction and wide span, because here's a section through our lovely new dining hall, and here is the space itself. The whole thing comes down to one pegged connection, as you can see there. And here are actually the students from that Studio One consultation master plan project having lunch with fellows from the college informally to continue their briefing over lunch. And amazingly, we're 2 minutes over program, but that's the story.
Absolutely fab. Thank you so much, Phil. So thank you so much, man. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I've been learning a lot as well. Just a completely random fact, just because I can. I noticed the Goodyear blimp in one of those photos just now, Phil, and I don't know if you're aware, that is the official bird of Redondo Beach, California.
Is it? Official bird?
I don't know. The official bird is an airship. There we go. Utterly irrelevant. Let's get into some actually relevant facts and questions. If you've got questions, please pop them in the Q&A. We've got quite a few to get through, and that's a-okay. We're going to go for as many as we possibly can. Particularly, I think if you've got any for Manu about what it's like studying design at Homerton, would be particularly good ones, but I think we've got a good range to start off with. Let's go for a couple of quick fire ones here. Is design now accredited? And I don't believe the design course does come with accreditation. Am I correct with that, Phil, Manu?
Apparently they haven't got it yet, but I think they'll be in the process of getting it once, or like when we are in our 4th year, because there hasn't been anyone who's actually graduated to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, so certainly the potential for it, but we can't guarantee it at this stage.
Yeah.
Someone's also asked about recent changes in ARB and REBA and what those mean. Phil, is that something that you can talk to, or not? A-okay if not.
Yeah, it's a live conversation with which the department and the whole architectural teaching community in the country is trying to get their heads around. So the background is that the ARB is trying to find ways of making, the Architects Registration Board, who accredits the architecture course or courses in the country, is trying to find ways of making the course shorter but more tuned to the needs of practice, so that it's not the same kind of drawn out, expensive process that it has been for the last generation. And in doing that, they've created a little bit of ambiguity. I don't think it's a problem. It's just changing the point at which they accredit courses. I would look up the ARB website on this detail, but this applies to all schools of architecture. So it's a live conversation and not one to worry about.
We've got a few questions about sort of the technical end of the course, which I think is worth bringing in here. So how tech focused is the degree? Are you taught different software that you need to know, or are you expected to know some of it or learn some of it yourself? So
we have had we have a module in our course called Professional Skills, which sort of teaches us how to use these different software. So we've received like official tutorials in Rhino and AutoCAD, so that's been quite helpful. And then a lot of the rest of it's about compiling portfolios on InDesign using Illustrator and using most of the Adobe tools that you can have. Oh, and Photoshop. Yeah.
Someone's also asked about Grasshopper. Do you use that one particularly or not?
Not yet, if we do. Yeah.
I always encourage students to have a go at all sorts of different software, not just for the course, but because practices will sometimes give some advantage to someone that comes with, for example, Revit, which is not a program we always use in teaching, but often there's similarities between them all, and particularly the Adobe products are standards, so Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator. Just use your summer holidays to learn some stuff just because it will help you on the course.
Someone's asked, what ratio of the sketches produced are digital versus on paper? Is it the student's decision, or does the use of necessary software limit the ways to go about architectural sketching? That's a doozy.
You can talk about first, Manya, and I can.
Sorry, what?
Why don't you talk about first year, and then I will take over.
Yeah. So in first year at the start, we were expected to use our like proper like paper pen sketching, but then as we started introducing digital tools into our lectures, and then we had to progress more into well, we could choose what ratio we wanted to pick, but when we were taught the softwares officially, there was more of an emphasis on using digital tools. And now the work I actually have set for Thursday is entirely software based, so there is no it's just digital work for this week. So I guess they divided it in first year.
Yeah. And as you go on, the hand drawing never dies really, but it's something which you can draw over and over something. So you do some drawing, then you might scan it, you might then Photoshop it into a section through a digital model. You might then collage something in Photoshop, draw back into it. And so you find there's layers of hand drawing and CAD drawing, or CAD modeling, I should say, and then the visualization work. But I think the ability to draw into it and also draw formally a section and a plan happens by hand to start with, so you understand scale and get scale wrong by hand to start with, which is what everyone does.
It's also good to brainstorm and things by hand. I feel like that wouldn't go away going up. So CAD would sort of be used to like finalize or like make your drawings professional, but hand drawing will sort of be the starting tool to actually come up with a design. So that's sort of how it goes.
Good point. In practice, we always try and do well, we don't even try to do hand drawing, we do hand drawing, not as a sort of drafting thing on a drawing board necessarily, but as a scribbling, drawing, big plan exercise, because it means that the whole team can do it. And we sometimes call it design combat. You've all got fat pens and we're trying to express our ideas on top of each other, and it produces a very rich conversation which the most junior to the most senior person in the team can participate in.
Good question. We've got a whole lot of questions coming in. That was a fantastic one.
Yeah.
Let's go for a couple here based around other opportunities for professional work experience or placements on the course, or for working with companies. Now, I suppose there's sort of two layers to this. There's certainly the opportunity to do some of that in the holidays, and links that you can make with your director of studies, with people in the faculty. It can help build that. But is it built into the course, Phil? It's
not. There's professional studies, so you get a sense of who's who. You might have a chat with somebody one of your design teachers or someone who teaches a course. The way that this is a whole conversation, but the way that practice works in reality is we have jobs based on the projects we have, and we will always take part ones in my office, but beyond that it's quite hard to predict the work that we actually have, and that's the same for most practices. And certainly the department can't facilitate that, although we can give introductions and so on. I would encourage students thinking about this to recognize that going into a local architecture practice is probably, you're not going to be very useful to that practice, even until you're several months into you being a part one, which is the piece of work after you've done your degree. But if you have a local office, or you know somebody who you know of a local office, nothing wrong with just going and knocking on their door. And I don't exaggerate, just go and turn up and just say, hi, I'd like some work experience. It's harder for them to ignore you. And they come thinking about what you might be able to contribute. You might say, I'm good at Photoshop, or I can do InDesign. I can help you to do a presentation, or I'm great at model making. Make sure you're not just lying. And if you've done that bit of extra work, they might say, oh, well, sure, we've got a model you could do. But the other thing I have told my students this as well, get on a building site or go and build something. And I know it sounds extreme, but you're more use on a building site than you are in an architecture office. And if you can then in 3 or 4 or 5 years time, turn around to the developer that says, oh, you bet you've never laid a brick wall before. And you'd say, yeah, I have. I've laid a brick wall in the rain, and it helps so much to know how these things work. And it doesn't need to be a full-on building site if you don't want it to be. It could be voluntary work, building a path or repairing, something internationally, whatever. It's just know how things go together and how arduous that is. So it will give you some humility and perspective when you're drawing these things. Is that fair, Manya?
Yeah.
Let's dive into a couple of parts of the admissions process. We've had a few questions about. Someone asked very briefly which of the two courses has more maths. That's design.
It's design.
Absolutely. So the admissions assessment. There is an admissions assessment in architecture. That is one that is taken just before the interviews occur, so into late November, early December. If you're invited to interview, you'll automatically be registered for that and asked to take that online. And that is an assessment that tests your drawing skills. More information will be uploaded to the website as that gets updated later on in the year. So double check the website. I've already posted a link to it in the chat for architecture and for design. There's a link to all of the assessment details, but some of that will be updated as we go through the year. It's not used to deselect candidates. If you sit the assessment, you will be having your interview. So please don't be worried about that. The assessment is taken online. Admissions interviews, though, depend on the college. So at some colleges, you may get one interview or two interviews, lasting the same amount of time overall. Or at some colleges, they may be interviewing online. At some colleges, they may interview in person. At Homerton, we will be interviewing online this year, and we have a single 45-minute interview, which covers absolutely everything that we're going to be asking you. The other thing we've had quite a bit of question about, Phil, is the portfolio. So can you tell us a little bit about what you'll be looking for and expecting to see in an architectural portfolio, both in terms of the types of content and the types of things that are being expressed within it?
Yeah. I was just thinking, I wish it wasn't sitting on this page, but I wonder if maybe there's nothing. I'll just leave it there. I was wondering if there's something more recent on the drawing work. So in your portfolio, I always look for some ability to the ability to draw. I want to see you're able to draw not just a composition, but draw from life. So have you drawn a building or a person or a cat, whatever? So it's just so that I'm comfortable you're not just tracing something. We want to see a bit of diversity of media. So that might be some hand drawing, some digital drawing. There might be some making in there, 3D making, maybe there's some painting. So that sort of different ability, different scales, and also the messiness. I'm not asking you to be messy for the sake of it, but just don't be afraid to show the first version of something which didn't work out and why. And that's particularly the case with design, because we're interested in why did you design this, I don't know, wheel system, car system, and what were the first versions of it, and why did you change that process? So that's that iteration, I think.
I think one of the key things you said there, especially, is talking about the sort of sketching, the drawing from life. We're not expecting perfection in it. We're not expecting necessarily something to be fully sharp and photorealized. But I suppose this comes back to your point earlier about communicating through the art. Is that something you're looking for within the portfolio? Can you hear me, Bill?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah,
Yeah.
communicating.
Are you looking for?
I wasn't sure if you finished.
No, sorry, I had. Is that something that you're looking for, the ability to sort of communicate through the different mediums, the different bits of art that they're putting in the portfolio? Nope. I think we're having some technical issues here.
No, back now.
There we go. So I'll ask one more time just in case it's working. Are you looking for that ability to communicate the ideas through the artwork that is being expressed there? It doesn't have to be technically perfect or anything.
No, I think we'd like to see that you can get a sense of proportion and scale. But yeah, technical perfection. We're not looking for the best artist. We're looking at somebody with that range of ability and understanding for what they're looking at and why. So
does it need to
study.
include building sketches, or
No.
is it okay if it doesn't?
I'd like to see a bit of building sketch, but it's really drawing anything, just to understand that you can draw something. Something that gives a sense also of, the understanding of the sustainability of something. So taking a good look at why is there greenery there? Is it doing a water retention job? Is there shadow and sun? How are people using it? Is there some life on something? So it's not just studies of a water bottle or something. It's looking more in more detail at how somebody's using something and why, how it sits in that social context.
I mean, Manu, what did you include in your portfolio, if you can remember? Tell us a little bit about what it was like putting that together.
So I had a bit of architectural, like a portion of architectural work, but then a lot of that was drawn from life. So I had slightly unfinished pieces where like the center point was the focus, and I could talk about why I decided to draw those particular parts of the building, or what made me realize that this drawing was technically finished, as though like I had finished conveying the message that I intended in my drawing. I also had a lot of like messy sketches of the same thing, but from different points of view, using different media to analyze different aspects of the same drawing. So like I just drew something as simple as a cup, but then I used things like oil pastels versus watercolor versus coloring pencils, or even like graphite pencils, just looking at different things of the same cup. Was it reflections, texture? Maybe it was something to do with who was using the cup before, or like the stains or marks left on the cup. So I was talking about how different tools can reflect different ideas of the same sort of piece. Those are some of the key things I can think of from my portfolio.
A good question we've had here. How would you recommend for somebody who's not taking A-level art to help build a strong portfolio to get those skills? Are there any sort of apps or programs that might be useful, or is it just about just getting out there and sketching some stuff and doing some things?
Great question. Just get out there and have a go.
Yeah, I didn't take A-level art either, and I feel like what helped me was to like look at artwork that was produced by other people, look at or draw from life, look at YouTube videos, or like listening to talks or podcasts by people who are artists or architects that like just worked on or discussed their buildings. It's like the way they communicate their ideas or the way they talk about their work in a more professional manner helps you really understand like their reasons or their ideas behind artwork, and it helps you to look into art in a more educational sense than maybe you had explored before without having taken it as a subject. And then also, I don't know if this is discussed quite often, things like MOOCs or an EPQ could help. Those are like online courses you can take that you can get like a certificate at the end for MOOCs. They're not really something you can put in your CV, but they sort of educate you on different topics, things like processes of design or other things. And I took some of those.
So
Life
worth noting,
drawing classes are a good suggestion. So there will be something at a local art college. It's just a great way of really getting somebody to look over your shoulder and see what you're doing and get that coaching. And just I was just looking at this image here, for example. If you went to do some drawing of this building or a building similar, you might do a whole view of the dining hall, but you might then do a sort of study in plan of where people are walking. So where are the staff going? Where is the cleaning going? How are people serving? Then you might do a detailed study of one of the details. So how did the timbers go together? You can't quite see it in this drawing, but how do the footings of these beams or these columns hit the ground? And little studies like that start to build up an impression which wouldn't just come across from one drawing here. So I think it's looking carefully at something, not just to produce the drawing.
Couple of last questions on the portfolio. Apologies, I'm typing a couple of answers as we go as well. Someone's asked if this is separate to the 6A4 pages that need to be submitted. I think that please don't be confused. The requirements of the portfolio may differ a little bit between colleges. So that is just something that you submit as part of your application. It's not submitted at the same time as your UCAS application. So it's not got a 15th of October deadline. It's submitted a little bit after that, usually at the end of October. The college that you apply to or end up allocated to will tell you what they require, how many pages it is, what format it needs to be in, and when it needs to be submitted by, because that can vary between colleges a little bit. So just be aware of that. couple last ones. Phil, is there anything that is like something to really avoid in the portfolio? I suppose people are a little bit anxious or worried about doing something that is completely off base. Is there anything to absolutely not do?
Don't just copy somebody else's drawing, because you'll be amazed what you recognize when people do that. We want to see your own ability, not just a copy of someone else's piece of work.
And particularly if you claim that as your own, as something that you have done from life, or kind of saying we have certainly seen that happen before. Should portfolios include annotations as well?
Yes, please, because it helps me to understand, helps us to understand why you did it and what it is.
I know mine was I had like 3 to 4 pictures, and they were all like over, and they had a bunch of annotations and text around it, sort of like explaining. Well, there were like little notes that made it looked more like an unfinished sort of piece, but something that I could actually talk about. And I was also going to say that something to avoid in a portfolio is something you don't think you can openly or easily actually talk about or discuss with the interviewer. So if you think that that's something that you're not able to like if it doesn't convey anything, or something that you don't think you can work through, would you say that's something to maybe not put in? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Don't put something in you can't speak to. So if you can't say why you did it, is that what you're getting at? If you can't tell us
something like
back
that.
and say why you did it.
Like, yeah.
Good one.
Let's talk a little bit about a couple of technical things with the courses here. Someone's asked, would you be disadvantaged applying for design if you only take maths and no other science subjects? Depends on the college, but at Homerton, we'd be absolutely fine with that. They've also asked, the website makes it seem as though you can very easily switch between the 2 courses whenever. Is this true? So what sort of scope is there for switching between the architecture and design
Not
courses?
true. It is possible to switch from design to straight architecture, but not the other way around, because the maths is so much more difficult.
Yeah, that maths requirement is really really key. I mean, like, Manu, having taken the design course, how strong is that maths element in there?
Yeah, it's quite heavy maths. It goes past further maths, and then even like past, it's around like it goes like the topics are sort of what we've touched on before, but they advance quite quickly. So if you were to switch from architecture to design, you might not be able to catch up, especially because a lot of the maths we do will be integrated into our study work next year as well. So yeah.
Someone's asked, this is a little bit of a technical admissions one, but the design course is advertised as a balance between engineering, architecture, and material science, but the admissions process is identical. And I have to be pretty wary with this, because the admissions process has the same elements, but it is not identical. We do assess our architectural students as potential architects and our design students as potential designers. Phil, if you're looking at the difference between these 2 disciplines, how would you characterize the sort of differences in what you're looking for? Obviously, they do have some similarities as well.
Yeah, I think it's often, and thinking about the interviews in particular, it's often dealing with a particular product type of problem, product making type of problem, or problem solving problem. So we will tend in the design portfolio to see, here's a thing that someone's tried to make, either 3D printing it or trying to manufacture it, and they tested it, then they went back to the drawing board to test it again. And so it's that iteration of a product which is interesting. But actually, there's often just so much overlap that we would often look at an architecture student or applicant and say they could be a design course person, and the other way around. One of the common factors is often people have done 3D making in their art course, and you can see that degree of iteration. It becomes a phone holder, becomes a mobility device, and you see that it becomes a thing which is not just a space.
Let's go a couple more. Someone's asked, when writing a personal statement, are you allowed to reference your portfolio in it? I would avoid doing that, mostly because you might not send the same portfolio to all universities. So they may not have that bit of information. I would keep the personal statement separate and add your annotations to the portfolio, as Philip has suggested, as the key thing to do. I would keep those two as separate items. Remember, the personal statement goes to all the universities. Portfolio may not. Someone's asked, what are the benefits of the design course? Mania, you're living that dream right now. What do you think of the big upsides of that? design course?
Well, currently in first there's a lot of overlap, but already I can sort of see that we sort of approach designing something a bit in a bit of a different way to like what people who would purely do architecture would do. So rather than doing the extra history and theory, so like understanding the social aspects behind the design, we sort of look more into understanding the technical aspects of the design, looking into like all the structural or like the like zooming into the details of the design rather than looking at a building as a whole. We can look into the materials and maybe like a specific part of the building, like a wall or a window. So there's that. So I guess we get to, well, doing the design course, so the benefit of, well, zooming in more into the things you're interested in designing rather than looking at it as an overall concept.
And just how hard is the maths? A couple of people are asking about how heavy the maths content is. We're only the
They do
first year in,
bridge the
obviously.
gap. So like it wouldn't be a sudden jump from A level. So the first few lectures that we had were going over like the basic concepts that we did in A level, such as vectors. They introduced matrices, and if you've done further maths, it's quite a big like it's quite helpful in like the gap between the two. And then it progressively gets harder, but not in a way that you're suddenly just thrown into the deep end, you know, like we do have like worksheets and stuff to build it up. So it wouldn't be too difficult. And our exam that we just did, it was also not, it was well made, and it was a good representation of the kind of stuff we were taught in the lectures. So not too difficult, but yeah, it is still university maths. So yeah.
A couple of other quick ones. We've got a couple of minutes left. We're going to try and cram in as many as we can. A couple of additional ones on the portfolio. Would you want to see 3D modeling software or digital work in there? You absolutely can.
You can if
you
want.
You don't need to, but you can.
Yeah, and not exclusively at all. I think if you can do it, show it once. Don't show it on repeat.
Yeah.
If people are doing product design or design projects, could they include more physical examples of things they've done with some photos or product iteration slides from a project?
What do you think,
I should think so. I mean, that was a big chunk of my portfolio. So I included a bunch of different design work and products that I'd made, and I included like slides of how I arrived at those designs and some of the 3D modeling and sketch work that I did to get there. So, and I was seeing another question about doing an EPQ, and I have done one before, and I did do the artifact section of the EPQ rather than doing the essay, and I think that helps because you get to already have an idea on like budgeting or like working through design, maybe interviewing people and then building test models. And all the skills are not only easy to include in a portfolio, but also transferable to your interview and like your course. That's another question on there. So yeah.
Another good one here, actually. Someone's asked, can you include, oh, sorry, Phil, go first.
I was going to say, there was a question about photographs and showing it. I think going back to Manya's earlier point, as long as you can say why you included that photograph.
The annotations really do help in that front. One last one on the portfolio, and I think that'll probably bring us to the close before I get everyone to close it out this evening. Can you include schoolwork in the portfolio, or is it better for it to be kept separate? And I think that's a particularly interesting question for those who are taking A-level art or equivalent courses. Phil, what are your thoughts on that?
What do we mean by schoolwork here?
Things that are part of the A-level course that they're doing. So maybe an arts project that they're doing in their school time.
Yeah, that's the whole. I'd expect to see that, unless I've misunderstood the question.
Nope, I don't think you have.
I would say that makes up a majority of what people do, but you shouldn't limit it to what you're told to do.
Yeah, it should sort of expand outside of schoolwork, but schoolwork should be in there. Yeah.
Fab. Well, that does bring us to the end of our time this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to ask one last question to both Phil and Manya just to close things out this evening.
Sure.
We hope this has been really useful. We hope you've gained a lot. But guys, if you're going to give one message out to people who are considering potentially studying architecture or design, one thing for them to take away to think about, what would it be? Sorry to put you on the spot with this one. Probably should have warned you first, but this way we get a nice, honest answer. What would be that message you want to get out to these potential applicants?
I would say draw the why. So draw why you think that building or thing is there. So that's the ability to draw it, the ability to see why it's there, and try and explain that through drawings.
All the why is great. That's your next book. Great.
Everything you draw or design is sort of like would be through some sort of journey, or could show some sort of journey. It could be it would be to send a message or to convey an idea. I feel like I've said this a couple of times, but I think that's one of the core things of designing something. It like sends or fixes a problem or sends a message.
Good one. Give it
I
purpose.
think that,
Yeah.
I think that's fab advice. Go and read and devour more stuff about architecture and design. Go practice your drawing skills, draw from life, go draw that why, go think about the purpose behind everything. We hope that you have gained a lot from this session. We'd love to see applications from you in the future, wherever you do apply to and whatever course. We wish you the very best of luck. More information coming about forthcoming Homerton sessions on every part of the application process, which we do online, our webinar series. So do keep an eye out for that. But for now, a huge thank you to Manya and to Phil for giving up their time this evening to come and help you all and give you all an insight into these two fantastic courses. And have a wonderful evening, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining. Thanks a lot. Hope to see you here.
Thank you. Yeah.
Wonderful. I will close the webinar at this point.